Welcome back. Now, a lot of research conducted on the history of South African jazz music always points out to the influences of the Bebop revolution and the impact it had in the development and the evolution of the genre in this country. We also cannot forget how jazz music became a key part of South Africa's struggles in the 20th century. And as we count down to the 20th edition of the Standard Bank Joy of Jazz Festival, we decided to once again place the spotlight on this timeless genre. And we've invited the leading voices in these spaces in terms of radio. And joining us are radio personalities and jazz scholars, formidable ladies, Shadow Twala, Khomoso KG Moketsi, and Brenda Sisan. A very good morning to you, ladies. Welcome to the show.
Good morning.
Good morning. Morning.
So early.
Very early. Now, I'm going to start with you, KG. I suppose we should start establishing your definition of what jazz music is.
For me, I don't like definitions because I've never considered myself a purist. I give a musician the space to be creative and allow themselves to do what feels most comfortable to them.
Yeah.
And if it hits my heart and my ear comfortably, I'm done with it.
Yes.
I'm not comfortable with me as a consumer being the one who tells the musicians how they should do their music. But purists will tell you otherwise. But I've never considered myself a purist.
Right. Shadow, I guess you share the same sentiments?
Jazz. I mean, it's improvisation, music, and as KG says, whatever it is that you lean towards is what it is. And I think if anybody you ask will give you a different answer because it's how you relate to it. It's almost like a relationship. You know, you say, what is love? You know, we'll all describe it differently.
Yeah.
But it's more how you feel about it.
Yeah.
And what it evokes when you listen to it.
It certainly is a feeling. Now, Brenda, what sets South African jazz music apart from the rest of the world?
I think like other artists from other parts of the world, what sets them apart, what sets African artists apart is the expression of who they are. If jazz is an expression, then the expression about what informs you, what informs your culture, how you want to express yourself, and what your indigenous forms and all of that, I bet contribute to what creates a specific South African nuance. Yeah.
You know, ladies, South African jazz music had many elements contributing to its evolution and development, and the chief of which is the rich cultural diversity of its inhabitants. So, identity, who we are, where we come from, as you just mentioned, is a major contributing factor to its evolution, isn't it?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think that living in a multicultural society, the way South Africa is, means that different people tell different stories.
Yeah.
I always was blown away by Zim Ngqawana whenever he'd walk into the studio for an interview with me. And I'd ask the proverbial question, what influenced your music? He would always say to me, I walked in and allowed the spirits to take over. And, you know, there was a time when I couldn't make sense of that. But his passing, in hindsight, forced me to go back and listen to the music, and I got it. That something bigger than even him moved him. But fast forward to now, there's a young guy called Duduzo Makhathini who applies literally the same principles, who says, I just allow something that's much bigger to guide the space. And I think that's what makes South African jazz so extremely exciting. It's not very book-orientated all the time. There's a lot of other forces at play that allow for it to thrive.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, Shadow, I guess we cannot ignore the fact that South African jazz music played a key part in South Africa's struggles in the past.
It did, you know, Brotherhood of Breath, and a whole lot of other artists. I think it was one way of sending the message across to the rest of the world. It's a way of documenting our history and who we are, and I think that's how we could connect with the rest of the world in sending the message out. So, Johnny Jani, who were part of those, you know, and Abdullah Ibrahim, who still is busy with that at the moment. So the story doesn't end, actually, but it continues, and through this music. And again, we say, what is jazz? Was Miriam Makeba a jazz musician? Was she not? You know, so the purists will tell you she was not a jazz musician. But her music can be notated to mean jazz eventually, you know.
True.
So, yeah, I think
Yeah, Brenda, let's talk about the bebop revolution. How did it influence jazz music in South Africa?
Every time I talk about how South Africa got to be part of the jazz conversation, I just think about the fact that when you keep something away from a community, they find a way to interact with it. And I think South Africans, by way of smuggling music in, by way of studying what was happening in America, they found themselves as well, following the same trends, just like it is now, I suppose. So. Even if we were away from what the rest of the world was doing, culturally we found a way to be part of the movement. So South Africa was influenced like with everybody else, but also South Africa had musicians that also felt that they wanted to express their response, to the conversation at the time. So I do believe that it's a global conversation, and it's how you get yourself into it. Earlier on we were just talking about how issues of the struggle, it's a continuous conversation, the conversation of jazz. It doesn't stop anywhere. Whoever is playing it at that moment is articulating their current state where they are in terms of the state of mind, state of society. So there's always a reference to what somebody else is saying and your response. So it's always like call and response, if anything. So South Africa we may think that South Africa was left out, but even during the times of bebop, there were ways in which the sound came. There were visitors, there were ships that were coming through, and all of them were bringing particular.
Now, Brenda, I
stories.
take a point that jazz music is a continuous conversation, because we will continue with this conversation with the formidable ladies in jazz music. There's radio personalities and jazz scholars Shadow Twala, Kgomoso Keiji Moketsi, and Brenda Sisane, helping us to unpack what South African jazz looks like in 2017. Stay tuned to Morning Live as we will continue this conversation after the break. Don't go away.